So these are pretty much the same. Splice mode gives you your actual mode or splice operation. That means that it's ready to give you the magnification window of what you're actually splicing within the machine. Splice mode is what we discussed before, where you can select what type of splice you want to do, single mode to multi-mode, multi-mode to multi-mode, single mode to single mode. Or if you've got the diagram instructions from the manufacturer, select the exact fibre that you're actually splicing with to give it a more accurate attempt at splicing. Heater mode, like we said before, always select the correct size of your fibre splice, which will always be on the packet or with the manufacturer's instructions where you've got them delivered from. This one's at 45mm, so we've selected 45mm. If it was 60, we can select 60. We'll take that back to 45. If it's overheating or underheating, hit edit, click in the box, and you can change the heat time. So if it's overcooking, reduce the time. If it's overcooking, and so on and so forth. Memory is what it's actually stored. So it stores in sequence the splice results of previous splices that you've done. So it'll tell you the loss readings of your last so many splices depending on how it's set. So let's say for argument's sake my last 10 splices, if I wanted to inspect how well it had spliced or cleaved or anything else going into the machine, it'll show me my last lot of results, and I can see that they've been at a good angle and use that as evidence sometimes if required as part of the service level agreement. Yeah. If I've had any error results, and that's handy to know because it might be something to do with the functioning of the machine, i.e. the arcs need changing, the electrodes need changing. So that's a good thing to know from there. Clear all splice results. So if I've had something like the electrodes changed or this has been sent off for calibration, I can reset its previous memory so it's back in sync and it's calibrated.
Does it overwrite when it gets full? Or does it just stop saving?
It'll just keep going over itself and then your previous ones will start to list down. Camera image. You can actually set this, and what that's in relation to is when you actually close the window. Now we went into splice operation and it zooms in. Yeah. Now the way this is factory set at the minute is the left hand side is magnified, the right hand side is under greater magnification than the left. So if you look to the left, when we put something in, it'll do this and show you your two fibres coming in. On the right, it'll zoom them in even further for you to give it a better inspection, a personal inspection.
So what's the magnification in the Y side and the X side?
That one, it depends what the machine's set to. When we went into the settings before, you can change the magnification that they're set to. So for argument's sake, or for teaching purposes, let's say that this one's set at ×4 magnification. This one's set at ×10 magnification. The one on the right is always more zoomed in than the one on the left. And that's the internal settings of the machine itself. Now let me go back one because I've jumped the gun there. Maintenance. Fusing power calibration. Now this is generally set for the fusing of the arcs. That's normally at about 200 degrees Celsius when it comes to heat. It's a bit like a lightning bolt when it fires to fuse. You can adjust it through there. I personally, unless you're extremely experienced with this machine, would not go into this setting. You can stabilise the electrodes. You can replace the electrodes so it knows to send itself back to a factory reset if you have replaced the electrodes like discussed before. You can clear the fusing count. Now the fusing count, the reason why it calculates how many times you've fused two fibres together is in relation to actually replacing the electrodes. Now it should say in the manufacturer's guide, let's say it's a fictitious figure but using it as an example, your manufacturer's guide might say you can do 3,000 splices with those electrodes and then they need changing. That's a good way of having a check how many splices you've done before those electrodes need changing. Does that make sense?
You actually have to check it. The machine won't give you a warning to say that you've reached that limit.
No, you'd have to check yourself. If you have just changed the electrodes, yeah, you can clear the cleave count. Now cleave count is different to fusing count. Fusing count is how many times you've fused the fibres. Cleave is how many times you've cleaved the unit. Now the reason this machine shows you both is you might have noticed on here you've got a link button. You can wire this or get this to talk to each other wirelessly, and it'll calculate how many cleaves you've done. The reason for that is on the older systems with regards to the cleaver, you'd cleave and cleave and cleave until you got a bad cleave or a couple of bad cleaves, and then as an engineer you'd rotate the blade on the inside. Now you've got high, medium and low settings on the cleaver itself, and there's 14 rotations of the blade. So it's not just a case of rotating it once and then it's no good. You can keep rotating it through. If you link these two together wirelessly on the new 90S, if that does a couple of bad cleaves or whatever you set it to as a number of bad cleaves, it'll automatically rotate the blade for you itself. So you don't need to worry about that then. All you need to keep account of then is what setting it's actually on, so when it's gone through its full 14 rotations, you can replace the blade. Motor calibration, ZX and Y, is in regard, see these when we lock the fibre in? When we actually close this to splice two fibres, what you can't see is the two motors in here. Bring that in, and both up and down to align the fibre or the core cladding, and in and out to bring them together prior to fusing them together with the arcs, the electrodes. You can actually change the setting of the motor if the motor's out of calibration there. Again, I wouldn't recommend you do this unless you know what you're doing. But that covers everything on the menus, other than diagnostic test, which speaks for itself. It'll run a diagnostic test on its own systems.
Period that we want to maintain the device.
Just when it starts playing up, but again, I'd send it off to get done to whatever company you've bought it from, Fujikura, Sumi, and so on and so forth.
How many splices have done in this machine? Can we check?
Maybe 4,000.
2 seconds, so your fusing count, let's check motor calibration. Fusing count 234.
It's the new. Okay.
Tells you the serial number of your machine, the version of the software that it's using, how many counts it's done, its total. Last authorised service, next authorised service will be on the 17th of the 7th, 2024 next year. And that, guys, is everything covered. You've even got a guide in there if you want to go into the guide, or if you forget any information. So if you forget information that we've just discussed then, such as splice and heater mode, you can go in and the guide will give you a description like I've just given you them. It tells you what's within the splice and heater mode, splice mode selection, splice condition settings, heat mode selection, heater conditioning settings. And that's the internals of the machine.
Thank you very much, Alan.
No problem.
Thank
No
you,
problem
thank
at all.
you.
Don't forget to send